Alright, so in our last video, what we started off doing was we started learning about validation. So we had here name, address, email, phone, and birthday. And so if I hit next, all the validation errors came up. So name required, address required, email required, invalid phone number. So we'll start off by just entering in some information just to get going. So Kirk, jim@kirk.com. We had, that's address 123 Enterprise Lane. Email is jim@kirk.com. Our phone number will be 222-333-4444. And we'll hit next because birthday is a static field, and we'll just choose a birthday. So July 12th, 2017. Hit next. And that's where we stop. So now what we're going to do is we're going to finish off the rest of this page. And then we're going to move this into a table, and then we'll move on to state variables and session state and so on. So the focus of the rest of this exercise is to learn more about session state. The first video's purpose was to learn about validation, and now we're going to learn how to save data as we continue. So the first thing we're going to do is just finish this page. So I'm just going to take that away, and what we're going to do is start by adding a new panel. So here, I'm actually going to do it in code, so we're in source mode. Just under panel 2, because we had panel 1 for the text box inputs, and we had panel 2 for the calendar. So we're going to add a new panel here. And it'll be called panel 3, which is perfectly fine. I'm going to put a little break tag here just to be sure. And this panel is going to have a checkbox list and a text box for quantity. So we're going to turn this into a little miniature shopping cart, just a few fruits that we're going to add. So I'm actually going to switch back to design mode for a moment. And what I'm going to do is checkbox list. I'm going to drag that over to the panel just to make sure that before we populate stuff. So I just want to move that into the panel. So with the checkbox list, what we'll do is there's two options with checkbox list. We can choose data source to connect to a database, or we can edit items. So we're just going to manually edit items this time around. So we're going to add in a few items. So let's hit add, and I'm just going to put apples. And then pears. Peaches. And grapes. All right. And let's add a text box to enter in a quantity for whatever we choose here. So I'll just say enter a quantity. And add a little text box. And we'll add a button after that for next. So before we do that, let's actually call this text box TB quantity or TBQTY. And we'll add a button. And the button will say next. And the ID is going to be btn submit 3. We already have a submit 1 and a submit 2. So now it'll be a submit 3. And I'll just double click and create the event handler for myself. Just get that out of the way. So it's below calendar 1 selection changed in our CS file. So that's our third panel. So now, if we run it, let's just view what's there. And now we have 3 panels. So what we'll do is we'll say name is Jim Kirk, 123 Enterprise Lane, email jim@kirk.com, phone number 222-333-4444. Hit next. Notice that we had hidden our calendar in the last exercise, so it didn't hit itself. Now what we'll do is we'll choose some items, or at least one item. Apple. We'll say like 3 apples. Hit next. All right. So what we want to do now is we want to get this next button going and link it in such that it unhides the panel, unhides panel 3. So in the event handler, what we're going to do is, if I double click on, if I double click on the event handler for the second submit, we're gonna unhide panel 3, but we have to still hide it in the ASP file. So we're gonna say panel 3 dot hidden, or visible, sorry, equals true. But it's already visible, so we actually have to go back to the ASP file and make visible equals false, and we'll run it one more time. All right, so switching back to default.aspx, and actually I'll switch to source to do this, just to be on the safe side, but panel 3, clicking on that, going to my properties, saying visible equals false. And we'll try again. All right, so Jim Kirk, 123 Enterprise Lane, jim@kirk.com, then 222-333-4444. Hit next. Our calendar comes up, choose a date, hit next, and now our third panel pops up. So now let's finish off this page by adding our final panel to this. So we have panel 3, we need a panel 4. Now what we're going to do after these panels is create a table and move these panels into separate table cells. So more on that in a moment. For now, let's finish up by adding panel 4. Inside panel 4, we're going to ask the user for their PayPal ID and give them 3 pay options, which will tie into the lesson for today, where we're going to learn about different states and saving data. So first things first, let's add a text box. And before we put the text box in, let's say enter your PayPal ID. now we can drag over a text box. And this text box, we'll call it TB PayPal. And below PayPal, so I'll put it like a little break tag there. We're going to put 3 buttons. And these 3 buttons will relate to the session stuff that we're going to introduce, or the state stuff we're going to introduce today. So we're going to add 3 buttons. All right, so I'll switch over to design mode to do the buttons. But this first button, its text will be pay by session. And so we'll call the ID BTN session. The second button we're going to drag over will be pay by cookie. And so its ID is going to be BTN cookie. And then finally, the third button we're going to create will be pay by query string. And we'll call this ID BTN query. All right, so let's create the event handlers for all 3 items. So pay by session, double click, BTN session click. Pay by cookie, double click, BTN cookie click. And pay by query string, pay BTN query click. And so now to finish off this panel, let's hide the panel and we'll unhide it from the previous next button. So I'm going to switch over to source, making sure that panel 4 is highlighted. I'm going to say visible is false. And what we'll do is we'll jump over to the next button above from panel 3. And in BTN submit 3 click, we'll say panel 4 dot visible equals true. And now we can run this and verify all panels unhide properly. All right, so let's run through this. Say Jim Kirk, 123 Enterprise Lane, jim@kirk.com. Hit next. So our panel unhides, choose a birthday, hit next. We'll choose some quantity of pairs this time, so 2 pairs. Hit next. And finally, enter your PayPal ID. So I'll just put like 11111. Get pay by session, pay by cookie, pay by query string. All right, and essentially, now we have all the functionality in place. Now let's organize this a bit better. So what I want to do is I want to set this up to be a 2x2 table. And in HTML, tables involve using the table the tag, the TR tag, and the TD tag. So we're going to learn about how to do this in ASP.NET. Now there's a reason why I didn't do tables from the beginning, and you're going to see in a moment after we've created this table why I didn't do that. Because it's a bit painful to work with tables once you've created the table. So it's always best to create your stuff first and then move into a table after. It gets tricky when you have to edit code after, and you're going to see why that is. So I want to have a 2x2 table, so I want to actually move this calendar up here, and then these apples, pears, peaches will be just below the birthday and next button. And then this PayPal stuff will move adjacent to the apples pairs checklist. So we're going to have a square for our table. So 2 by 2. So to do that, I'm going to go switch to default.aspx. I'm going to full screen it in source because we're going to need all that space to view. All right, so we have here our table, and what we want to do is we want to drag over an ASP table item. So to do that, we're going to go to Toolbox, look for a table, drag that over to... All right, so to bring a table onto the screen, I have to go to Toolbox, drag over a table. I'll put it just above panel 1. So we'll have ASP table, table 1, run at server, and actually now I'll full screen it so it's easier to read. And I'm going to take that closing table tag, I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to paste it all the way at the bottom of my page, just below the end of panel 4. So I'm going to switch down to panel 4. At the end of panel 4, just above the closing div, I'll paste that table tag in. So just above panel 4. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the first 2 panels in a new row. So going back to ASP table, notice the syntax. We have ASP table, ASP colon table, as opposed to the table tag. So now I want to introduce a new row. So I'm going to say ASP table row. And I'm going to take this closing table row, cut it out. I'm actually going to put this closing table row just below the end of panel 2. So let's put it here. All right, so we have here ASP table row. Now I want to move each individual panel into a separate table cell. So I'm going to introduce a table cell just below the table row. So I'm going to say ASP table cell. I'm going to cut out the closing table cell. Put it there. Open a new table cell just above panel 2. Cut it out. Paste it at the end of panel 2. Alright, so the code isn't nicely formatted because we're introducing it afterwards. You can always fix that up after. But we have our first row. Alright, so the trick is that we close the table cell at the end of the first panel, open a new table cell before the second panel, and then we close off the table cell and close off the table row at the end of the second panel. Now for panel 3, we're going to open up a new row. So we're going to say ASP table row, and we'll close off this table row. And I'll put the closing of this table row at the end of panel 4. Alright, so I moved that at the end of panel 4. But now going back to the new table row in panel 3, I'm going to open up a new cell. So ASP table cell. Get rid of that closing table cell, or at least you cut it out and paste it at the bottom of the panel for panel 3. And just above panel 4, ASP table cell. And I'll put that new closing table cell just above ASP table row and save it. Alright, so let's run this. So just say view in browser. Alright, so Jim Kirk, 123 Enterprise Lane, jim@kirk.com, 222-333-4444. Hit birthday. Now you notice the calendar is beside our entry. I'll choose like July 19th. Hit next. Now we have apples, peaches, pears, and so on. Choose a quantity of 2. Hit next. Enter PayPal ID and hit any button. And now we're here. So at this point, we've finished building out the structure for default.aspx. The next step is to create basically create the code to handle saving this information by session variable, then by cookie, and then by query string. And we're also going to do view state at the same time as a separate exercise. So for now, let's actually create new files for those pages that we're going to need to redirect to. So we'll leave default.aspx. And right now we only have the default page. So we need to add 4 more pages to this application to support those buttons, and including one that will be outside of this application. So first thing is add new item. And I'm going to add a web form. And this first web form will be called pay session. So pay session.aspx for that pay by session variable. We'll hit next. Then we'll add another file. Web form pay cookie.aspx. Hit add. Add another file. Call this one pay query string.aspx. Don't forget, all files should have the place code in separate file checked off. And finally, so these 3 files will be redirected from a button, each of those 3 buttons at the end of that form. We're going to add a 4th that we're going to work on separately. And this one's a web form called myViewState. And we're going to place that in a separate file and hit add. And so at this point, we have all the files we need to work with. All right, so one thing, before we continue with sessions and cookies and so on, one thing to note about the table itself, and that is that the table overlaps everything, so it makes life difficult to work with. So that's why we actually create all our stuff separately in separate panels, and then we created the table afterwards. So for example, I want to double click on this next button. It no longer goes to my event handler. It just jumps over to the panel page. And so unfortunately you can't do much with it. The only thing you can do is maybe cut the button out, paste it outside of the table, do your edits, like maybe double click on it to create your event handler, and then copy it back to where it needs to go. So you kind of have to do some weird massaging at that point just to get it going. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the pay by session button. So in panel 4 here we have btn session, and we have a pay by session. We create an event handler called btn session click. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump over into the default.aspx.cs file, and in btn session click we're going to write the code to get the session variables up and running so we can actually pass the data from the first page to the second page. And so to do that, what we need to do is we need to start retrieving the data. What we're going to do is we're going to save the name, address, and phone, email, and birthday to sessions. And you'll find that working with sessions is very easy to work with. So inside btn session click, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add each of these items. So all I have to do is just say this.session.add. And I have to give this session variable a name. So there's 2 arguments that are passed into this method. So first is the label or the name for the session variable. I'm going to call this smyname. So session myname. And then the second thing is the actual value. So I'm going to say tbname.text. All right, so we did tbname.text. Let's move on to this.session.add for the next one is address. So I'll call it smyaddress for tbaddress.text. And we have this.session.add and then smyphone for tbphone.text. Session.add and then smyemail for tbemail.text. And finally this.session.add smybirthday for tbBirthday.text. Okay, so now that we have our variables in place, what we want to do is we want to redirect to the next page. The next page will be paysession.aspx. So we're going to say response.redirect to paysession.aspx. And then inside paysession, we're going to retrieve these variables, and we'll work with them there. So moving over to paysession.aspx, we're going to start with the ASP file. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep it really simple. We're just going to add like 5 labels, one for each item. All right. Let's start by just putting a little message like thank you for shopping with us using sessions. Using sessions, the break line. And then we'll add some labels here. So I'm just going to drag over a label. ASP label. I'm going to call this label LBL name. I'm going to leave the text as label. So just generic label. Do a copy and paste. So I'm going to add like 4 more labels. All right. So then we'll do like LBL address, LBL email, LBL phone, and LBL birthday. Okay. And we'll put a break tag in front of each of them. So these are our labels. All right, so now let's move on to the CS file and let's retrieve this information and populate these labels. So I double click on paysession.aspx.cs. And it's really easy to retrieve this information. So just as easy as it was to populate the session variable, it's just as easy to retrieve it. So we'll just say LBL name, for example, .text is equal to session of smyname.toString. That's it. So we just retrieved the name. And we'll do the same for the other 4, and we'll run it and verify it. LBL address.text is equal to session smysession, smyaddress. dot toString. LBL phone dot text is equal to session s my phone. Now spelling for these is important. LBL email dot text session s my email dot toString. LBL birthday dot text equals session s my birthday dot toString. Okay, now let's run it. What we'll do is we'll run default.aspx. We'll enter in all the information. Then we'll hit pay by session, and we'll see whether or not the data populates in this new page. So I'm going to right click on default.aspx, go view in browser. And we'll go Jim Kirk, 123 Enterprise Lane, jim@kirk.com, 222-333-4444. Hit next, give him a birthday, hit next, say he likes apples and wants 3 of them, hit next, enter our PayPal ID, so let's say 121212, hit pay by session, and it redirects to a new page. Thank you for shopping with us using sessions. We have Jim Kirk, 123 Enterprise Lane, jim@kirk.com, 222-333-4444, and July 24th, 2017. So at this point, we've demonstrated how sessions work and how easy it is to take data from one page to another through a session variable. So now the next step is to go to work with cookies. So we did sessions. Let's try the same thing again with cookies. So under the btn cookie click event handler in default.aspx.cs, let's save all the same information, name, address, phone, email, and birthday in cookies. So this time around, it's actually, there's a second line of code. So it's actually two to three lines of code to do per cookie, whereas session was just one simple line of code. So sessions in essence are easier when you look at it from that way. But but cookies aren't that bad either. So there's the object HTTP cookie. This class will handle cookies. So we'll start with name, and we're going to do 2 approaches to saving a cookie. So the first one is, we'll call it name cookie equals new HTTP cookie. And we'll give it a name. So I'll say my name. Then the second step is to provide the value. So we'll say name cookie dot value equals tbname.text. And then the third line is to say response dot cookies dot add for name cookie. All right, so let's do this for the other ones. Now the remaining ones will be easier because we'll take it as 2 lines. So we'll say HTTP cookie. We'll call it address cookie equals new HTTP cookie. This time we'll call it my address, and this will go full screen here. And the second argument for my address will actually be the value. So tb address dot value, or sorry, dot text. And then all I have to do is just say response dot cookies dot add for address cookie. So this one's a little bit easier, just 2 lines of code instead of 3. And we'll do the same for the other remaining items. So phone cookie. So my phone tb phone dot text. And then we have email cookie. And then finally, birthday cookie. There, so we have all of our cookies created. The last thing to have is to redirect to the paycookie.aspx page. So response.redirect to paycookie.aspx. Alright, so let's go to paycookie.aspx and let's retrieve these cookies. So first thing we'll do is in paycookie.aspx, it's empty. We're going to be populating with all the same information again. So I'm going to actually take all the labels from paysession.aspx and copy and paste. So we're just going to reuse them. So I'm going to copy all that, paste it into paycookie.aspx, and we'll just say thank you for shopping using cookies. So this is what we should have for our paycookie.aspx. So now on the C# side of things, the CS file, so in paycookie.aspx.cs, inside page load, we're going to retrieve all this cookie data and print it out to the screen. So we're going to use the HTTP cookie object again. So we'll say HTTP cookie, start with name. I won't use the same names. I'll call it name cook. So name cookie is equal to. Now we're not saying new HTTP cookie this time around. We're actually just going to retrieve the existing cookie. So we're going to say request.cookies, and just in square brackets provide the name of the cookie. So my name. And then we'll say lbl name.text is equal to name cook dot value. Do the same for address, so add cook is equal to request dot cookies for my address. And then lbl address dot text equals add cook dot value. HTTP cookie for phcook equals request dot cookies for my phone. And then LBL phone dot text equals phcook dot value. Now email, so HTTP cookie email cook is equal to request dot cookies for my email. Then LBL email dot text equals email cook dot value. Finally, bday cook. So those are all of our cookies that are retrieved. Now let's see how it turns out. So we'll start running default.aspx again. Alright, so let's run this. So again, Jim Kirk, 123 Enterprise Lane, and then jim@kirk.com, 222-333-4444, and hit next. Give him a birthday, July 12th this time, hit next. Apples, quantity of 1, hit next. PayPal ID 121212, hit this time pay by cookie. We redirect and we see thank you for shopping with us using cookies, and all the information is displayed from the cookie. Alright, so we've done sessions, we've done cookies. Now let's do the query string. For the query string, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to retrieve the quantity and the item that was selected, so whether apple, peach, or pear. So we're going to start off in default.aspx.cs, so the event handler for btn query click. And what we're going to do is we'll retrieve the quantity. So I'm going to create my own URL out of this. So I'm going to say string qty is equal to tbqty dot text. And then string food is equal to checkbox list 1 dot selected value. So my checkbox list was known as checkbox list 1. Now I'm going to create a new URL. So I'm going to say string new URL is equal to, and we're going to put the name of the new file so that we're going to redirect to. So pay query string dot aspx question mark, and we'll say food equals, and then plus food, and then plus, and then ampersand qty equals, and plus qty. And then finally, response dot redirect to new URL. So now let's move over to pay query string.aspx. And we're just going to reuse the same labels from the earlier cookie and session, except we'll say thank you for shopping with us using query string, and we'll use our two labels for to be LBL item and LBL quantity, or LBL QTY. Okay, so let's move over to the C# file and retrieve the data. Alright, so again in page load, we'll let it automatically load. So the thing about the query string is that we should check to see its availability. So maybe we misspell something, but we don't want it to crash on us. So we'll say if request.queryString for, let's say, food does not equal null, meaning it actually exists, then we'll populate the label. So we'll say lbl item.text is equal to request.queryString for food.toString. The same thing if request.queryString for qty does not equal null, then lblqty.text is equal to request.queryString for qty.toString. And then we can go ahead and run it again and enter items in. This time we'll hit the another button to see this page happen. Alright, so let's enter the stuff in again. So Jim Kirk, 123 Enterprise Lane, jim@kirk.com. And hit next. July 12th, hit next. Apples, quantity 2, hit next. 21212. This time we hit pay by query string. Redirect. Now it says thank you for shopping with us using query string apples 2. So it actually printed out both items. We probably should have put a little break line between, but that's okay. So now we basically completed this little mini application where we had a default page and then it redirected to 3 separate pages. In this exercise, we basically covered validation, and then we covered tables, we covered what panels do, we covered how to create session variables and redirect to a new page and retrieve those session variables. We do the same thing with cookies, and now we've done the same thing with a query string. And so now the next part will focus on view state. So we'll learn how to actually refresh the same page using view state. So we're going to navigate to another page that we created called myviewstate.aspx.